We are now live. We're not live, we're recording. But anyway, that's not the point. Welcome to Based. Daniel Wild is my guest name. Here he is. We call him Dan, but you know him as Daniel because that's what you are on the ballot. And congratulations. You're the Liberal candidate for the seat of Spence, federal seat of Spence, and you're based. So that's why you're based on the road today. We're not in the usual confines, but it's the same format. We invite people that we think have a lot to say and are good, solid citizens, and you are one of those. So welcome. And I just got to kick off. Like, you are a successful career person, but you've decided to run for Parliament. Tell us about it. Why is that?
Well, it's a good question. We'll have a good answer for that in 3 weeks' time, whether it was a good idea or not. But look, basically, I've obviously been interested in politics for a long time. I spent most of my efforts on, I guess, the mission and the values rather than a political party per se, working at the Institute of Public Affairs. And I just think the reality is that if those of us who are concerned about the direction of the country, I think you've just got to try to get into the political system and try to do what you can. One of the things that we're missing, with the exception of some like yourself and a number of others in Parliament, but is sort of political standard bearers that can carry the argument in Parliament. And like I said to you before, I think the reality of our system of government with a compulsory preferential system is the best chance that we have to get our values transmitted into policy in Parliament is through the Liberal Party. So that's basically why I've had a crack to put my hand up for it. Yeah,
good on you for doing that. And because you are actually quite a bright human. You, I think, have an MBA, honours in economics.
I haven't quite finished. I've had to put the old MBA on hold.
Okay, you're going to get an MBA and you're a Masters in economics and honours, in economics. And of course, you mentioned the IPA, very important political think tank. Tell us about that, because what the IPA stands for, I think, is very important.
Yeah, so basically the Institute of Public Affairs is a not-for-profit research organisation. So we're completely funded by just regular Australians. We don't get any government money or anything like that. So it's basically just people that support mainstream Australian values support our organisation. The IPA was established in 1943, basically to make the case that the wartime controls that were in place should not be then brought into the peacetime era. One of the flashpoints was the bank nationalisation proposal of late 1940s, which was ultimately defeated. And the IPA sort of led that debate, not just in relation to bank nationalisation, but that would have then brought in and ushered in a period of the kind of socialism that took place in the UK, which basically moribund their economy for a couple of decades, and we avoided a lot of that. So it's basically an organisation that believes Australia's a good country, want to keep it that way, and to maintain and enhance our freedoms. And we do that through research and then communicating that to the public and to policymakers.
And that's really the Cliff's Notes of your pitch, I think, for Parliament, is that you are a common sense candidate. From what I've seen, I've known you for a few years, but I've known you in this capacity. So it's great to see you out there on the hustings. You've been out in Spence for many months. But tell us about, because the electorate name often means nothing to people, but it's the northern aspect of the city of Adelaide. So we're talking about suburbs like Elizabeth Grove, Anglevale, Blakeview. It's quite a big, geographically reasonably large area. And historically, it has been a manufacturing hub, but that's not the case anymore. How do you see that?
Yeah, it's an interesting electorate, and it's a part of the city that's been forgotten about and neglected because it is largely a safe Labor area. So there's about 4 or 5 state seats that are ensconced within the federal seat that are all very safe Labor by and large. And so it's basically neglected. It had a 72% no vote at the referendum, which was the highest no vote in a Labor seat anywhere in the country. One of the highest metropolitan no votes, Labor or Liberal, in the entire nation. So it tells you that these are common sense mainstream Australians. They've really had a gut full of politics as usual. I come from a family of Labor voters. My parents supported Bob Hawke and actually Paul Keating as well. It wasn't until 1998 that they started to vote Liberal, with John Howard sort of convinced them that he was better on the economy. But the Labor Party we see today is not the Labor Party of Bob Hawke. And I think the community in the North understands that. One of my jobs is to actually give them an alternative. So that's why I'm there, because I want them to have an alternative to say, well, your future is going to be better served with a candidate like me within the Liberal Party. And I think they're very receptive to that, and they understand that, the Labor Party isn't what it used to be.
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of work out there for years in my role, and that's very much the vibe I pick up there. People are no nonsense, they're common sense. There's a Labor vote in the DNA, but I feel like that's only because it's been the way it's been, and that has worn off. And I think we saw that with the Voice referendum. I was out there during the vote, and it was stark. People were really, really annoyed. First of all, annoyed by virtue of the fact they had to be there, and secondly, just didn't understand the relevance to them. This is a real cost of living issue for them. That's the main driver. And I think, you had Holden, of course, famously, South Australia's, most important manufacturing base there for a long period of time. And of course, the satellite city of Elizabeth, which supported it. And people, I think, now are starting to understand that there's more for their vote, more they need for their vote, and you're giving them that. So
yeah, and the other point to make is it's changing a lot, and when I talk to people in the community, it's a struggle because you've got the older areas of Elizabeth and Salisbury and so forth. You've got these new developments around Anglevale and Virginia and Blakeview, as you mentioned, and then you've also got Gawler, which is its own separate thing as well. So it's quite a disparate electorate, and in many ways yes, there's common concerns, but there's also, specific concerns in certain areas and certain communities within that electorate. For example, Anglevale, I was there the other day. It costs $800,000 for a new house and land package, which is like 500 square metre property. Yeah. And number one complaint is the houses are leaking. Like they're just not built well, a lot of them. And so you've got these young professionals moving there. And it's an hour and a half to get into town on a busy day, and people are really struggling, and they're really resentful of the fact that the government has put them last, and they think the political system has failed them. And so what I encounter is a lot of resentment, a lot of distrust of politicians. They don't believe the system's working for them, and they don't believe they have a choice. So they're deeply frustrated and concerned.
So tell me a little bit about your general background. What brought you to this point?
Yeah, well, basically born and bred in the suburbs of Adelaide. Went to school here, went to uni here. My wife was born here, went to school here, went to uni here as well. Grandparents came over as 10-pound poms after World War II. So my dad's side were from Oldham, mum's side from Birmingham. They independently came here, then mum and dad met when they were in Adelaide. And then basically dad, left high school, became a sparky, started his own business, employing, 5 or 6 people, depending on how things were going. And worked, but mostly on industrial sites, including at Holden's and many others around Adelaide at the time when there were plentiful sort of jobs and employment in that area. Mum was either stay at home or work part time as a secretary to help pay the bills, and it was that kind of time where basically if you put your head down and worked hard, you could get ahead. And I had a great start in life, and then after finished uni, went interstate for a little bit for work, then came back to raise our family and got a house with a mortgage in the outer suburbs, and kids go to school, eldest goes to school, and basically I just thought it was the best possible time for me to give it a crack.
And I've got some of my fondest memories following Dad around at work. You must have that as well, and probably have memories of places like the Holden, site as it was.
I do actually. The memory that comes to mind, I can't remember which site it was on. I would have been 12 or 13, and Dad just gave me a drill, and I was doing something, and I didn't have any safety gear on, and I was just drilling something into something. I can't remember what it was, and one of the foremen came over and said, "Mate, you've got to put glasses on, otherwise you're going to go blind."
12-year-old playing with a drill. You've got to put glasses on, or maybe just put it down.
What are you doing? But I remember doing that. I remember sort of standing around, passing him tools, always giving him the wrong one. I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. But it did actually, even though I don't think I was particularly helpful for him on a job site at that age, I remember it. Yeah. And I look back and I remember the guys he worked with and employed, and the kind of camaraderie that he had, and I think even though he worked hard, he enjoyed it as well. So I really, like you, I do look on that with sort of, you look back at it on kind of rose-coloured glasses to an extent, but I do appreciate the opportunity that he gave me to go out there and see what it's like to actually work with your hands and do things.
It gives you a little insight into it. My dad was at the Royal Adelaide Hospital, and he would go in to see some patients every now and then, and he would say, "I'll just be 5 minutes," and then it's like one of those sort of stop motion things where you just be getting slunk further down in your chair as you go, like 2.5, 3 hours later. No TV, no phones, no iPads. I'm quite old. It's interesting. And the time in Victoria, this was a time when Victoria was starting to really decay. Are you worried about that kind of decay creeping into the rest of the country?
Oh, yeah, I could see it happening. I can see exactly what's happening. where Victoria was, say, 10 years ago is where South Australia is starting now. And I can see where this goes, where you have this just massive population influx that's not been planned for. Then they go build, debt, disruption everywhere. Things are built shoddily, you run out of money, and then you have just chaos. That's where I can see that's where South Australia is going. Yeah. And when I was growing up, South Australia was the most livable city. It was the most affordable city. It was the most family-friendly city, and it's not anymore. I mean, it used to be the 20-minute city. It used to be the big country town. We've
got a lot of events though. We've got a lot of sporting events now. You might have been distracted by.
There's a lot of events going on. But I just think we're losing the whole point of this city. Like, we're not Sydney, we're not Melbourne. We don't have to be like that. And I don't think that the political leaders understand that they are actively undermining the unique South Australian way of life. I can see that very clearly from the vantage point of having been interstate for a while and coming back. And I go, well, you talk to families and they go, yeah, well, what's going on? Like, I used to be able to get around easily and afford things. Now I can't, and we're losing it.
And I think people are waking up to this bread and circuses that I was just alluding to as well. Initially people, they love the golf and they love gather round, which is coming up, and but eventually people say, yeah, but what else? And what is this really built on? And I think we're starting to get to that point now. People in this state are a little bit sick of being, kind of distracted by shiny things. So hopefully that message gets across, and it gets across in the next, next 3 weeks as well. So just by you said your dad ran a small business, was employing people, and yet he was voting Labor. He would never do that now. What was the rationale between then and now in terms of a reformed Labor voter, we would say?
Well, I just think Labor's been taken over by Radical. It's a completely different party. It's not the party of workers anymore at all. It's a party of the inner city elite and the wealthy, and that's what Labor and the Greens have become.
6 years ago, when I was a candidate, I am a candidate again, by the way, so there you go. When I was the first to candidate, the reality of that candidacy versus what I thought it would be was quite different. The actual, getting out there, and you said it today, you're out there, you sort of become a mechanic and you become a tech expert, and, you're a jack of all trades out there, and you're really doing it all, kind of on that basis. Has it been different, the experience of campaigning, than you thought it would be?
It has, yeah. I don't think anything prepares you for a campaign than being a candidate itself. And, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be out there and to be in the community campaigning, and I enjoy doing it. But yeah, you do a lot of things yourself and you learn lots of things. I really enjoy door knocking because you hear lots of stories about people's lives that you would not encounter at all. And it's given me a really important insight into how a lot of people are struggling with their lives. And it's not just it turns something from a statistic into a real human story. Yeah. And I shared this on my social media the other day, but when I was this actually happened twice when I was door knocking, very similar stories actually of, in both cases, a mum, probably in their 40s, both of whom had young sons who were wheelchair bound. And when I'm talking to people, I sort of say, introduce myself, then ask them, what's on your mind? What are your concerns? How can I help? And both of them made the point that their number one concern was they can't get their son into the shower because he's wheelchair. They don't have a wheelchair accessible facilities. There was no accommodation available in their area. And you sort of look at it and you go, well, we're spending billions of dollars on NDIS and social welfare. We're meant to be building all of these houses, but clearly it's not getting to the people on the ground that need it. And to me, it sheets home the point that government isn't working for the interests of people. Yeah. It's not like we're not spending enough money. It's just not getting to people who need it. So hearing the stories of people who really need this help has, I think, given me an insight into what I want to do if I can get into Parliament to try and help and make sure that people are being looked after.
Yeah, and so what's the ambition in terms of policy settings? I mean, obviously, when you're a lower house member, your job is to advocate for the local community, but it's so much more than that. Parliament, a trip to Parliament is a big deal. So what else do you want to achieve when you're elected?
Well, I think there's a few key things. On the policy front, I think clearly this mass immigration program has got to stop. I mean, it's just
that's really affected people out there.
It's affected people in the community in a lot of ways. I mean, one is obviously with the congestion on the roads. I mean, it's just bumper to bumper, all day long. Secondly, the housing. We just talked about Anglevale and the $800,000 house and land package. Thirdly, the social division. I've got to say that I don't recognise the country that I grew up in many ways. And everybody accepts that we need to change, and everybody wants, we are, I think, the most welcoming and tolerant nation on earth, and we should be very proud of that. But the sense that I get from again, discussions that I'm having at shopping centres and so forth is the pace of change is too rapid. People don't feel like they have control over their lives and over their local area. And they're concerned about the future for their children, whether it's the housing situation, but also, because we love this country, we want our children to grow up in a country that we remember, and we can see how that's slipping away. So I just had such a great upbringing. I'm so grateful for the family that I have and my mum and dad and what they did. But I can see that no matter how hard parents are working, they just don't feel like they can provide that future for their children. And like I say, that's not the country I grew up in. It's not the country I want for the future. I
know exactly what you mean. I think that all the time. I worry, and I've, like you've got 2 young girls. I've got 2 little boys, and every day, almost literally every day, I think, how can this be a better country than the one I grew up in the 80s and 90s? I mean, it is my rite of passage as a 50-year-old man to just assume and voice the fact that everything was better 30, 40 years ago. I have to go through that. But the truth is, it's always like music. Music's always peaked in the 80s or whatever. Yeah. But the truth is, I just look at the country back then, and you did have situations where people could work hard and get ahead. Now we're seeing people working hard and still staying behind. Yep. Government's getting bigger, and the point you make about the NDIS, when you simply, people can't have basic services, but there's a bureaucracy behind it. I worry about that, and I worry about the sorts of things that we saw in Europe, with the flow of socialism and beyond, we're getting the taste of here. And one of our other candidates, Irina Zagladov, who's the candidate for Macon, talks about her time in the Soviet Union. She had on her campaign trail someone come up and say to her that she just didn't understand what she was talking about when it came to big government and socialism. She says, "I lived through the Soviet Union." We're seeing it; it's coming in a sense, and I worry about it as well. But that's the doom and gloom. The reality is we can fix it. We just need to get those settings right, and we need the right people in Parliament. Do you have that sense as well that there's plenty to be hopeful for still?
Yeah, there is. I think a lot of people have lost hope though, and this is what really concerns me. It's pretty typical of me to encounter people that just aren't engaged at all with the political system because they don't feel it's working for them at all, and that's for both, to be honest, both major parties. And I worry about where that goes. You're always going to have people that, put in a donkey vote, don't rock up, and that's fine that, people are free to do that. But when you've got the level of disengagement where it is, when people really don't see their values reflected, not only in politics, but in the major institutions, if you're a typical punter and you go to a footy match, you go to maybe a meeting in your corporate job, or you go into a work site, your kids go to school, you go to a shopping centre, and you're inundated often with messages which are inconsistent with your values. And I just think that there's going to be a breaking point where you go, well, hang on a minute, like what kind of country am I actually living in? And the response of a lot of people is to then withdraw and to disengage. And then the more that you disengage, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to fix the problem. So, but I am encountering a worrying level of disengagement. I can't say whether that's widespread throughout the state or the country, but I can say it's very widespread in the community where I've been campaigning. And
this is the first election we haven't had corflutes, posters, and so you're the tip of the spear on that, which is good because it means we're not all up and down polls. But I was thinking today as I was driving, the fact that we don't see those posters might actually exacerbate that problem with people not being as engaged because we're used to it at election time. I wonder what that will do ultimately to the amount of people, the amount of people that get out and vote, and also just to the thought process about the voting process, whether that will stall it or whether it will stop it. And I think for many people it was never a big issue, but it certainly did focus your mind that we had an election coming up.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's unique to one electorate or another, but certainly in a seat like Spence, people, when I've been out there, have told me exactly the same thing. They just want the government to kind of get lost in a sense, and there is that level of detachment. Do you think, as you have been circulating around, there are issues that are specific to Spence that are not sort of elsewhere?
Yeah, I think the kinds of things that you talk about in Parliament and on this podcast are sort of best showcased in Spence. And I think this is true in a lot of outer suburban electorate. So I don't think there's, unique things in the northern suburbs that don't exist anywhere else. I think they're felt the most there. So I definitely know that immigration and the challenges there are felt the most there because of the massive population growth there. Certainly when you look at cost of living, because there's a lot of lower socioeconomic people on low incomes, well, they feel it the most. A lot of pensioners on fixed incomes, also many people on welfare, which is basically a fixed income. So if you've got a fixed income and your costs are going up, then you're in a lot of trouble.
Right.
I think there's that. And I think there's also this identity crisis that's taking place. Like I say, a lot of Labor voters, back when Labor was actually Labor, back when Labor actually represented workers, when my parents voted for them because my dad was a Sparky and he identified with Labor, that's dead. And I think that there's this identity crisis politically, culturally as well. And so a lot of people in the community are grappling with that. And I also think with this, woke ideology, which is just completely alien to any mainstream common sense Australian. Why can't we just say Australia is a good country without getting called racist? Like these things are just common sense. And I just think people have had a gutful of it and they're just frustrated and over all of this sort of inner city ideology that's getting pushed onto them.
And they can't even go to the footy without getting it
copying a welcome to country.
Bombarded down their throat.
Yeah, or land a plane.
Land a plane.
It's just unbelievable how,
Yeah, it's really grating on people. There's no question about that. Have you thought, as you're going around there, that you reflected earlier on your upbringing, your family life earlier. Do you think it's the case that as you circulate around, you can see other examples of that swing ready to happen? Families that were once Labor voters now looking for, the Liberal Party as a safe haven for their vote. I mean, is that with your experience in that environment? Are you sort of seeing that as you speak to people?
Oh, to an extent, yeah, for sure. I think the community wants to change. I've got no doubt about that. The community wants to change, and I also think it's the same in a lot of communities in the outer suburbs. I mean, we saw that in the Werribee by-election in Victoria. I think the challenge the Liberals had there was the Labor vote went down 16, but the Liberal vote only went up 4 on a primary. So again, it's one of my things I'm saying to people, particularly in the Liberal Party and elsewhere, is we need to actually engage, and we can't just assume that people will automatically just vote for us because we're not the other guy. Yep. So I'm really passionate about just explaining to people what I believe, and there's Liberal Party's views which I subscribe to. Then there's my views and things that I'll fight for, and I'm always very upfront about what I believe. And there's people that will give you different opinions, and certainly people tell you what they think, which is great. But I'm always make a point of telling people, well, these are my values and my beliefs, and I will fight for them. And I find that the reception is pretty positive.
And what does it look like as you get towards when we've got sort of 3 weeks or so until election day? People will be interested, I think, the life of a candidate between then and now.
Yep.
It's talking to as many people as you can.
Yeah.
But it's more than that. It's there'll be some candidate forums. You're sort of working around the clock generally.
Yeah.
But what does it look like for the next 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's basically just full-on campaign mode as it has been for a while. So it's everything, as you mentioned, candidates forums, being one of those annoying people at a shopping centre or train station, getting in your way as you're just trying to get to work and all the rest of it. But it's interesting. You talk to people and people quite rightly don't really like politicians. They don't want to engage with them, and I get that, right? But then people will also say when it comes time to vote, well, hang on, I've never seen this guy anywhere.
Yeah.
So you've got to sort of walk the line of, I know I might be annoying getting in your way, but I do want to have the opportunity to let you know who I am because you deserve to know who you're voting for. So I think people, what I have found is it's dignifying them with your time.
Right.
That's really the thing. And as a candidate, you can't be cloned. So there's a limit to how much you can do. I think door knocking is great, but you can only door knock 20 doors an hour roughly. So
and the seat is sort of 120,000 or...
It's massive, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people in there.
You can't get around, and it's geographically big, low density. I'm not a big fan of high rises, but having been a candidate, I love them. Because you can just knock them all off.
Get to 20 at a go.
Knock them off one time. But look, I'm really enjoying it, but it's just getting out there and communicating, well, at the end of the day, why I think you should vote for me and what I can do for you.
And there is, once again, going back to the issue of posters, corflutes, as we call them, what they certainly did bring was an element of feeling like you knew the candidate even when you didn't. You'd see that face everywhere. And so you at least knew who you were looking at when you got to a polling booth. I mean, I certainly felt like that. We don't have that anymore, so it's kind of almost exacerbates the issue for the non-incumbent, doesn't it? I mean, you've really got to get out there, and that's why you're working so hard at the moment. Get out there and get people to see you, and make an assessment.
Yeah, it's an interesting one with the posters. At one level, I'm happy that we, like you say, because the amount of time that you got to spend getting those posters up is just insane. So and the amount of cost of getting them. Right. So on the one hand, it's like, great, we don't have to do it. But at the same time, it is a relatively easy way of going, okay, that's a Liberal guy, that's a Labor guy. I agree with you. I don't know how it's going to play out. My instinct is that there will be some people that just don't know the election's on.
That's right.
And I think Spence had one of the largest group of people that didn't vote. It was about close to 20% who either didn't vote or who cast an invalid ballot at the 2022 election. So that's pretty worrying that it's already 1 in 5. And that could, 1 in 5. That could go up.
Yeah, it could. I think it might, actually. I think it might be one of the perhaps uncounted on effects of the core flute ban as we now have it. What about family life? This is a huge thing for a family because, as I have, not at home, but I've heard it said to others, we sign up for it. The family is sort of bound and gagged and taken hostage along the ride in politics, and it's so all-encompassing. It's how's everyone going with the time away and the media scrutiny and all that sort of stuff?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
I've got a very patient, understanding wife. I've got two young daughters. The eldest is at school, and they're obviously too young to know anything about politics, which is good. So it's all pretty good actually. I think I can get the balance, and the good thing is it's you've got a defined time period. It's not forever. It's 3 weeks, and then we'll figure out what to do after that.
3 years after that.
Well, 3 years
when you're elected. That's right.
In Parliament. So we'll get this done first, and we'll figure out the next step.
It's a great road, and you're really, really running a great campaign. And I'm seeing with my own eyes resonating out there in the community. They are, and I said I've been out there. We are paired. I'm paired with that area when we haven't had a lower house member, and it's being received very, very well. So keep up the great work, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the campaign unfold. Good on you.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Cheers.
Authorised by Senator Alex Antic, Liberal Party of Australia, Adelaide.